I'm 78 years old, and I want to tell you something that most people in the modern world have been conditioned to forget. The human body already knows how to heal itself, and for thousands of years, the plants growing in the ground were the only tools humanity ever needed to help it do exactly that. I am not telling you to abandon medicine. I am telling you something far more important than that. I am telling you that the relationship between plants and the human body is not folklore. It is not superstition. It is biochemistry that modern science is only now beginning to catch up to. And what researchers are finding in their laboratories is exactly what the herbalists, the root doctors, the village healers, and the forest walkers already knew centuries ago. The validation is arriving slowly, reluctantly, from institutions that were built on a fundamentally different philosophy of healing. But it is arriving. Most people think of herbs as seasoning. They think of chamomile as something mild you drink when you cannot sleep. They think of garlic as something that makes food taste better. They think of ginger as something to settle the stomach on a rough day. And that is where the understanding stops for most people. Decorative, pleasant, mild, safe enough to ignore, safe enough to dismiss. But here is what most people miss. These plants are pharmacological powerhouses. Every single herb that has survived thousands of years of human use survived because it worked. Not because people believed it worked, because it worked. And the mechanisms by which it works are often more sophisticated, more targeted, and more synergistic than anything a chemist can isolate in a bottle. Take the concept of a single active compound, which is how pharmaceutical development works. You identify the molecule that does something useful, you isolate it, you amplify it, you patent it. But plants do not work that way, and this is the deeper truth that most people never reach. When you use a whole plant, you're not using one compound. You are using dozens, sometimes hundreds of compounds that work together in ratios and combinations that evolution has spent millions of years calibrating. The plant does not just attack one pathway. It modulates, it supports, it buffers, it corrects. And the compounds in the whole plant often prevent the very side effects that the isolated version causes. Aspirin came from willow bark, but willow bark used whole does not cause the gastrointestinal bleeding that aspirin can cause, because the bark contains compounds that protect the stomach lining alongside the salicylates that reduce inflammation. When you isolate and amplify one part of that system, you get power, but you lose the intelligence of the whole. And that intelligence is what I have been working with for 55 years. Let me go deeper into that word, inflammation. Because once you understand inflammation, you understand the root of most chronic illness. Inflammation is not a disease. Inflammation is the body's response to threat. It is the immune system doing exactly what it is supposed to do. The problem is when that response never turns off. When the body stays in a chronic state of low-level alarm, that sustained inflammation becomes the substrate for heart disease, for arthritis, for autoimmune conditions, for metabolic disorders, for cognitive decline. Modern life creates inflammatory conditions: poor food, chronic stress, disrupted sleep, environmental toxins, a gut microbiome that has been damaged by antibiotics and processed food, year after year, decade after decade. And here's where the herbal world becomes extraordinary. There are plants that do not just suppress inflammation the way a drug suppresses it. There are plants that actually communicate with the regulatory pathways of the immune system and help restore its sense of proportion. Turmeric is the famous one, and its curcumin compound gets all the attention, but the real power is in taking turmeric the way traditional cultures took it, with fat, with black pepper, with other warming spices, in food, over time, consistently. Not as a capsule you take for a week, as a daily relationship with your body's chemistry. The bioavailability of curcumin increases dramatically in the presence of piperine from black pepper and fat. Traditional cooks knew this, not because they studied pharmacokinetics, but because they paid attention, over generations, to what actually helped people stay well. Adaptogens are another layer that most people have heard the word for but have not truly understood. An adaptogen is a plant that helps the body adapt to stress, not by sedating the stress response, not by forcing the body into a particular hormonal state, but by helping the body find its own equilibrium. Ashwagandha, rhodiola, eleuthero, schisandra. These plants work on the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the system that governs your entire stress response, your hormonal rhythms, your energy, your resilience. They help that system regulate itself better. They lower cortisol when it is chronically elevated and support adrenal function when it is depleted. And when the stress response is well regulated, enormous amounts of healing become possible because the body is no longer spending all of its resources on threat management and has something left over for repair. The gut is where this conversation gets truly profound. There is a reason traditional herbalism always addressed digestion first. Always. Before anything else, before treating specific symptoms, before trying to address what was happening in any other part of the body, you looked at what was happening in the digestive tract. Because the gut is not just where you absorb nutrients. The gut is where 70% of your immune system lives. The gut is where most of your serotonin is produced. The gut has its own nervous system, 200 to 600 million neurons, which is why researchers now call it the second brain. And the health of every organ in your body is downstream from the health of that gut. If the gut is not well, nothing else can be fully well. Bitter herbs have been used for thousands of years to stimulate digestive function. Dandelion root, gentian, burdock, artichoke leaf. When you taste something bitter, you activate a cascade of digestive secretions. Stomach acid, bile, pancreatic enzymes. This is why aperitifs were taken before meals in the old European tradition. This is why digestive bitters have existed in virtually every food culture on earth. The bitters work not by adding a substance to your system, but by stimulating your system to do what it already knows how to do. That is an elegant principle. That is working with the body's own intelligence rather than overriding it with something external. And then there is the microbiome, which is perhaps the most important frontier of understanding that modern medicine is grappling with right now. The trillions of bacteria that live in your gut are not passengers. They are participants in your biology in the most fundamental sense. They produce vitamins. They regulate gene expression. They train the immune system to distinguish friend from foe. They communicate with the brain through the vagus nerve and through the neurotransmitters they produce. In herbs like slippery elm, marshmallow root, and licorice root create the mucilaginous environment that beneficial bacteria need to thrive. They soothe and coat the gut lining. They reduce intestinal permeability, the condition people call leaky gut, which is now understood to be a genuine contributor to systemic inflammation and autoimmune disease. When the gut wall is intact and the microbiome is diverse and robust, the immune system is calibrated. When it is not, the immune system loses its sense of self and begins attacking the body it lives in. Here is the hidden layer that even people who study herbs often miss. The nervous system is always involved. Always. Because the nervous system is the master regulator of every other system in the body. When the nervous system is in a state of chronic activation, when you are running on cortisol and adrenaline day after day, week after week, year after year, nothing heals efficiently. Digestion shuts down, immune function becomes dysregulated, hormones go out of balance, sleep deteriorates, tissue repair slows, cellular regeneration slows. In deteriorated sleep is when the glymphatic system, the brain's waste clearance system, fails to do its nightly cleaning, which is now understood to be a primary driver of neurodegenerative disease. The brain cleans itself during deep sleep. Without that deep sleep, the waste accumulates. Over decades, that accumulation is devastating. Nervine herbs address the nervous system directly and gently. Skullcap, passion flower, lemon balm, motherwort, valerian used correctly. These are not sedatives in the pharmaceutical sense. They do not knock you out. They do not suppress the nervous system the way a benzodiazepine suppresses it. They bring the nervous system down from that state of chronic activation into a parasympathetic state, the rest and digest state, where healing actually happens, where digestion works, where the immune system finds its proper rhythm, where sleep deepens naturally, fully, and restoratively. The shift these plants create is not dramatic. It is subtle. But in that subtlety is profound power because the body, given the right conditions and enough time, heals itself with an intelligence that no external agent can replicate. Liver is another chapter that people underestimate. The liver processes everything: food, hormones, environmental chemicals, medications, metabolic waste. In the modern world, with the toxic load most people carry, the liver is perpetually overworked. When the liver cannot keep up, hormones that should be broken down and eliminated recirculate. Estrogen dominance, thyroid disruption, testosterone imbalances, these conditions are often as much a story of liver clearance as they are a story of hormone production. Milk thistle is the herb most people know for liver support, and silomirin, its active compound complex, genuinely regenerates liver cells. But burdock root, yellow dock, dandelion root, artichoke leaf. These are the herbs that move bile, that support the two phases of liver detoxification, that keep the channels of elimination open so that what needs to leave the body actually leaves. The practical application of all of this is simpler than people expect. You do not need 1,000 herbs. You need a deep relationship with a few. You need consistency above all else, because plants work with the body's own timeline, which is slower than a pharmaceutical intervention, and more lasting because you are building function rather than forcing a temporary result. You start with what the body needs most in your particular situation. You calm the nervous system first because a nervous system in chronic activation cannot heal anything. You support the gut because the gut is the foundation. You reduce the inflammatory load through food as much as through herbs because food is medicine or it is poison. And there is no herbal protocol that can fully compensate for a profoundly inflammatory diet. And you give the liver the support it needs to process and eliminate what is accumulated. You give the body deep nourishment with plants that are mineral rich, that rebuild the tissues slowly and thoroughly. Nettle leaf, which is one of the most nutritionally complete plants that grows, rich in iron, in calcium and magnesium and trace minerals. Oat straw, which nourishes the nervous system and the bones. Horsetail, which provides silica for connective tissue. These are not dramatic herbs. They do not produce acute effects. But taken consistently over months and years, they rebuild the body from the inside, the way good food and deep rest rebuild a body that has been depleted. And you pay attention. You develop the practice of paying attention to your own body that no standardized protocol can replace. You notice how you feel after eating certain foods. You notice how your energy changes with your sleep. You notice where you hold tension, where you feel depleted, where you feel alive. Because the herbs are not doing the healing, they are supporting the conditions in which your body can do what it was designed to do. That is the fundamental shift in understanding that changes everything about how you approach your health and your life. Healing is not something done to the body from outside. Healing is what the body does. It is the body's native intelligence expressing itself through every system simultaneously with a complexity and a precision that no external intervention can fully replicate. The question is whether we are creating the conditions for that healing to occur. Are we feeding the body what it needs? Are we resting enough? Are we reducing the inflammatory and toxic burdens that slow everything down? Are we working with the nervous system instead of against it? Are we supporting the gut, the liver, the channels through which the body cleans itself? And for 55 years, across countless situations where I watched people find their way back to vitality through plants, through food, through rest, through the quiet intelligence of working with nature rather than against it, what I have seen again and again is this: the body wants to be well. It is oriented toward wellness with a persistence and a creativity that is humbling to witness. When you stop burdening it and start supporting it, when you give it the tools it needs in the time it requires, it moves in the direction of health with a power that no drug was ever designed to match. Because no drug was designed to restore the whole. Only the body can do that. And the herbs, the real herbs, used with knowledge and patience and respect, simply help it remember how. The plants are not magic. They are millions of years of evolutionary chemistry and conversation with a body built by the same process. And when that conversation is allowed to happen, what emerges is not a cure. It is something better than a cure. It is a body that has learned how to take care of itself. And that is something that lasts.